There's something about witnessing injustice that stays with you forever, like the taste of burnt coffee on a cold morning. I've been telling stories for near about 50 years now. Most of them learned from folks who lived them firsthand. This one came to me from old Jake Thornton himself, back in 2022 when I was just a youngster helping my daddy with the harvest. Jake was 73 then, hands gnarled from years of honest work, but his eyes still sharp when he told about that October day in 1882. He'd pour himself black coffee, no sugar. Said sweet things made bitter memories harder to swallow, and tell how he spent his last $7.40 on something worth more than gold. "Son," he'd say, "sometimes the good Lord puts you exactly where you need to be, even if it's the last place you'd choose." The noon sun had baked Clearwater's Main Street into a furnace when Jake counted his coins outside Milligan's Mercantile. 3 crumpled bills soft as old flannel, 4 silver dollars worn smooth, quarters and nickels that clinked like promises he couldn't keep, $7.40, 3 months of fence mending for Sam Brennan, sleeping in hay that made him sneeze, eating biscuits so hard they could crack teeth. His mare needed grain. Her ribs showed through her coat like washboard ridges. He needed salt pork and coffee for the trail to wherever came next. Jake's stomach cramped from hunger, that familiar hollow ache he'd known since the war. The crowd's roar pulled him from his figuring. Wasn't a hanging Jake knew that sound? The hushed prayers and weeping. This was ugly laughter, the kind that made good folks feel better about their own troubles by witnessing someone else's worse ones. He pushed through the mass of bodies gathered by the courthouse. The smell hit him first: tobacco spit, stale whiskey breath, and that particular stench that comes when people find someone they can safely look down upon. Jake recognized it from the war, from prison camp, from every town that had run him off for vagrancy. Then he saw the cage, fresh-cut pine, sap still weeping amber tears in the heat. 8 feet square, maybe 6 feet high, just tall enough that the woman inside couldn't stand proper. She sat in the corner, spine pressed against the bars, wearing what had once been a blue calico dress. Now it was the color of dust and defeat. "Step right up, gentlemen." The auctioneer Polk, who usually sold livestock, rang a brass bell that hurt to hear. "Viewing time for another 30 minutes, then we commence with the real business." A painted sign hung crooked on the platform: "Dangerous property. Do not touch without permission." The woman wasn't looking at the crowd, her gray eyes fixed on something beyond the bars, beyond the town, beyond Texas itself. Her hands rested folded in her lap like she was sitting in church, except Jake could see dried blood under her fingernails where she'd tested every bar during the night. "What did she do?" Jake asked the fellow beside him, a banker by his vest and watch chain. "Depends who's asking." The banker spit tobacco juice that splattered near Jake's worn boots. "Judge Morrison says she stole from his household. Course, she was his ward after her folks died of the fever. Must have been something valuable." The banker's laugh was bitter as quinine. Valuable. Her daddy owned the best water rights in the county. Soon as he died, sudden-like, the judge swooped in with papers saying the man owed him $600. A woman in yellow organdy tossed a penny through the bars. It landed near the prisoner's foot. She didn't move to pick it up, didn't even look at it. "Make her dance," someone shouted. "Make her sing. Make her beg." But the woman just sat there, lips moving slightly. Jake recognized the rhythm, counting breaths. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out. Same thing he'd done at Rock Island, when the walls pressed close, and dead men lay stacked like cordwood waiting for the ground to thaw enough for burial. McAllister, who owned the biggest spread outside town, shouldered through the crowd like he owned it too. "Polk enough penny pitching? What's the real price?" Polk's grin showed too many teeth, like a weasel in a henhouse. "Well now, Mr. McAllister, we're conducting a proper auction. Viewing rights is one thing, touch privileges is another, but ownership, full and legal ownership, that's the grand prize." "She's not livestock," Jake heard himself say. Every head in earshot turned. McAllister looked him up and down, taking in the trail dust, the patched shirt, the weak old beard. "You're absolutely right. Drifter, livestock's worth something." The crowd laughed. Jake felt heat creep up his neck like he was standing too close to a stove. But he held McAllister's gaze steady as a held breath. The woman in the cage stopped counting. For the first time, she looked directly at Jake. Those gray eyes weren't empty of hope, they were past hope, in that quiet place where people go when they've accepted the worst. but dignity still burned there, banked like coals under ash. $5 for exclusive touching rights, McAllister announced, pulling out a gold piece that caught the sun. I want to inspect what I might be buying. Jake's hand went to his pocket. $7.40. Enough for 2 weeks of supplies if he was careful. Enough to reach New Mexico territory. Enough to keep drifting like tumbleweed. The woman lowered her gaze, started counting again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 10 minutes of inspection. Mr. McAllister. Polk sang out like a carnival barker. $5 gets you 10 whole minutes. Jake watched McAllister climb the platform, his boots heavy as judgment on the pine boards. The woman's shoulders tensed, barely visible, like a horse that smells storm coming. Wait! The word came out before Jake could catch it. McAllister paused, hand extended toward Polk. You got something to say? Saddle tramp, Jake stepped forward. The crowd parted like he had something catching. I want to know the full price, for complete ownership. Polk's eyes lit up like a gambler with pocket aces. Well now, another bidder? Mr. McAllister has indicated $20. You prepared to top that, friend? $20, more than Jake had held at one time in 5 years. The crowd was already laughing, waiting for him to slink away like a kicked dog. The woman had stopped counting. She watched him with the same expression his mother had worn the day his father left for California and never came back, curious about what kind of fool would stay. Jake pulled out everything. The soft bills, the silver coins, a Mexican peso from a poker game in Amarillo. His mother's thimble sterling silver, worn smooth where her thumb had rested 1,000 times. He walked to the platform and laid it all on Polk's ledger book. $7.40. 1 peso, 1 silver thimble that belonged to my mother. He pulled out his knife, bone handle worn smooth. This too. And I'll marry her. Legal and proper. That's my bid. The square went silent except for a dog barking somewhere and the creak of the cage bars as the woman shifted position. McAllister started laughing, like he'd heard the best joke at a church social. You can't bid a marriage proposal, you fool. Why not? Jake kept his eyes on Polk. You're selling a person like property. I'm offering to make her a free woman. My wife can't be anybody else's property. And I'm saying right now, before all these witnesses and God himself, that I give her freedom as my wedding gift. Bo. The woman stood slowly, unfolding herself careful-like, as if her bones might shatter. She walked to the bars closest to Jake, this close. He could see freckles across her nose like cinnamon on cream, the chapped lips, the clean tracks where tears had washed through the dust on her cheeks. What's your name? She asked. Her voice was hoarse but steady as a church bell. Jake Thornton, ma'am. She studied his face like she was reading a map to somewhere better. Then she nodded once. All right, Jake Thornton, I accept your offer. The crowd erupted. Some of the church ladies were dabbing their eyes with handkerchiefs. Even hard men who'd seen The Elephant were nodding approval. This was better than a hanging, this was romance, the kind they'd tell their grandchildren about. The ladies made her choice. Someone called out. Let her choose, voices added, building like a hymn. Judge Morrison stormed down from the courthouse steps, his face purple as pokeweed berries. This is completely irregular. The woman is a criminal. Then how can she be sold? Jake asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. The judge's mouth opened and closed like a landed catfish. Mrs. Garrett, the minister's wife, stepped forward with the authority of someone who'd organized 40 years of church suppers. Harold, she called to her husband, get your Bible. We have a wedding to perform. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The sun had shifted west, throwing the cage's shadow long across the dusty square. Jake pushed deeper into the crowd, catching fragments of conversation that made his jaw tighten. Caught her with the judge's silver spoon stuffed in her petticoat. My cousin says she poisoned his best hunting dog. Witch blood. That's what my mother claims. The woman in the cage shifted position, careful and deliberate. She kept her back to the corner post, watching the crowd's feet rather than their faces. Smart. Feet were just feet. Faces made it personal. A child's blue glass marble rolled under the platform, stopping near the cage bars. The boy, maybe 6, started crawling after it. The woman moved slow as cold molasses, reaching through the bars to roll the marble back. The child's fingers had just closed around it when his mother yanked him backward by his collar hard enough to make him yelp. "Don't you touch nothing she's touched." The woman's voice carried sharp as a dinner bell. "You want to catch whatever the evil she's got." The boy started crying. The caged woman pulled her hand back through the bars, folded it with the other in her lap. Started that counting again. Jake could see it in the slight rise and fall of her shoulders. "That's exactly what I mean about unnatural appetites." Mrs. Henderson, the minister's wife, stood close enough that Jake could smell her lilac water fighting with the crowd's stench. Living in the judge's house all those months after her parents passed. A young woman like that, no chaperone, makes a body wonder what arrangements were made. The banker beside Jake snorted. "Arrangements, Margaret Henderson. You know well as I do that girls' parents owned the sweetest water rights in 3 counties. Soon as they died, both of them. Same week, Judge Morrison swooped in with papers nobody ever saw before." Mrs. Henderson's fan snapped open, fluttering fast enough to stir the ribbons on her bonnet. "William Garrett, Judge Morrison is a pillar of this community." "Pillar of something," the banker muttered low enough that only Jake heard. McAllister had climbed onto the platform now, his boots striking the pine boards like a judge's gavel. He pulled out a silver flask, took a long pull, then walked a slow circle around the cage, studying her like horseflesh at auction. "Polk, this touching privilege, what exactly does it cover?" Polk's grin widened. "Why, Mr. McAllister, it covers a thorough inspection of the merchandise. Check her teeth, her hair, her general soundness. Man's got to know what he's buying." Jake's hands curled into fists. Around him, men were pulling out money. $2, $3, making their bids for inspection rights. An ant crawled across the platform near the woman's foot, carrying a breadcrumb twice its size. She watched it navigate around a splinter, over a nail head. Her lips moved, not counting this time. Jake read the shape of the words. "Keep going, just keep going." McAllister pulled out a gold piece, letting it catch the light like bait on a hook. $5, Polk. "But I want privacy. Draw them curtains you got rigged up." Jake saw the woman's shoulders tighten, just barely, like she was bracing for a blow that hadn't landed yet. Jake slipped behind Milligan's Mercantile, his back against the rough planks, still warm from the afternoon sun. The alley reeked of rotting potatoes and horse droppings. He pulled out his money, laying it on an empty nail keg, counted again, hoping the numbers might change like they did in dreams. $3 bills, soft as old dishcloths. 4 silver dollars, edges worn smooth. 8 quarters, 15 nickels, a handful of pennies, 1 Mexican peso from that poker game in Amarillo where he'd folded too early. His mother's silver thimble, the one she'd used to make his shirts before the consumption took her. $7.40. Plus the peso and thimble. From the square, Polk's voice carried over the buildings. "Gentlemen, we're moving to the main event, full ownership of this young woman, skilled in household duties." "She can cipher and read, too," someone shouted. "Taught the Morrison children their letters. Even better." Polk's laugh scraped like a dull saw on green wood. "Educated property. Think of the possibilities." Jake's mare needed grain, 4 bits would do it. He needed salt pork, coffee, beans, $3 minimum to reach the next town with work. Without supplies, he'd be gnawing mesquite beans and drinking creek water inside a week. $20, McAllister's voice boomed. $20 in gold for permanent ownership. Jake's knees bent. He squatted in the alley dirt, head down, breathing through his nose. The stench of rot filled his lungs. $20. Men like him worked 4 months for $20. Men like McAllister spent that on a single bottle of imported whiskey. Boot steps at the alley mouth. Jake looked up. The banker, Garrett, stood there blocking the light. "You fixing to do something foolish, son?" Jake gathered his money, shoving it back in his pockets. "Don't know what you mean." "That girl in there, Eliza Patterson, her daddy helped my wife when our baby came breech. Wouldn't take a penny for it." Garrett spit tobacco juice into the dirt. "Judge Morrison had his eye on their water rights for 2 years. Soon as Thomas Patterson died, sudden-like Judge appeared with papers saying Patterson owed him $600. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because somebody ought to do something. And it won't be me. I got a wife, 3 children, pa. And a bank the judge holds the note on." Garrett turned to leave, then stopped. "But a drifter with nothing to lose. Well, that's different arithmetic." Jake stood, his legs unsteady. $20 is $20. I don't have it. Maybe you got something else." Garrett walked away, his shadow stretching long across the alley. Jake came around the building as McAllister climbed the platform. The rancher's boots thundered on the pine planks. He pulled out a leather pouch, heavy with gold coins, shaking it so everyone could hear the metal sing. $20, Polk, count it. Polk's fingers trembled as he opened the pouch. The crowd pressed closer. Women fanned themselves faster. Men passed another bottle of rotgut whiskey. Jake pushed through the crowd. Bodies gave way reluctantly, like he was swimming through molasses. The platform edge hit him at chest height. This close, he could see the woman's fingers gripping her skirt fabric. Her knuckles stood out white as fresh-picked cotton. The ant she'd been watching was gone. Just a small, dark stain on the wood where someone's boot had found it. Wait! The word tore out of Jake's throat, raw as a morning cough. McAllister turned, face already red from whiskey and sun. What now? Jake pulled out everything, bills, coins, the peso. His mother's thimble caught the light, silver bright as hope. He set it all on Polk's ledger. Then added his knife, good steel, bone handle worn smooth from 1,000 small tasks. The knife that had kept him alive, kept him free. $7.40. Mexican peso worth maybe 50 cents. Silver thimble belonged to my mother. It's genuine sterling. Steel knife. Sharp enough to shave with. Jake's voice found its footing. And marriage. I'll marry her. Legal and binding before God and man. The square went quiet except for a dog barking 2 streets over and the creak of wagon wheels on the side street. McAllister's laugh started low in his belly, built to a roar. You can't bid a marriage proposal, you ignorant trash. Why not? Jake kept his eyes on Polk. You're selling a person like property. I'm offering to make her my wife. A wife can't be someone else's property. Every man here knows that law. I marry her, she's free. That's my bid. Polk's mouth opened, closed, opened again like a trout in shallow water. That's not. Mr. McAllister has bid $20 for a slave, Jake said, loud enough for the whole square to hear. That what we're doing here selling slaves because last I heard, we fought a war about that. Some of us bled for it. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. The word slave hung in the air like smoke from a distant prairie fire. Some of the women were whispering behind their fans. Judge Morrison appeared at the platform edge, his face purple as a bruise. This is completely irregular. The woman is a criminal. Then how can she be sold? Jake asked. Criminal or property can't be both under the law. The woman stood. The movement was slow, careful, like her bones might shatter from sudden motion. She walked to the bars closest to Jake, wrapped her fingers around them, this close. He could see the sunburn peeling on her nose, the cracked lips, the clean tracks where tears had washed through the dust on her cheeks. What's your name? Her voice came out hoarse, like she hadn't used it in days. Jake Thornton, ma'am. She studied his face like she was memorizing it for a long journey. You know what you're offering, Jake Thornton. You know what that means. I'm offering freedom, ma'am. You're offering to tie yourself to a complete stranger, to take on another mouth to feed when you can barely feed yourself. Why? Jake glanced at the crowd, at McAllister's red face, at the judge's fury, at Polk's confusion, then back to her gray eyes. Because I know what it's like to count breaths just to keep from going crazy. I know what it's like to be looked through instead of looked at. Something shifted in her face. Not hope exactly, but recognition. All right, Jake Thornton, I accept your offer. The crowd exploded. Women were crying into their handkerchiefs. Men were arguing about the legality. McAllister was cursing loud enough to spook horses. But Mrs. Garrett, the minister's wife, pushed through them all with the authority of someone who'd been managing church affairs since before most of them were born. Harold, she called to her husband at the church. Get your Bible. We have a wedding to perform, a real wedding, not this shameful spectacle. The judge stepped forward. She can't, this is illegal. What's illegal? Judge Morrison, Mrs. Garrett's voice could have frozen July. Honey, a marriage between 2 consenting adults or selling a woman like she's a milk cow, which one you want to argue before the Lord? The judge's mouth snapped shut. Polk fumbled with the cage lock, his hands shaking so bad it took 3 tries. The door swung open with a shriek of metal that sounded like freedom itself. The woman Eliza stepped out. Her legs buckled. Jake caught her elbow, held her steady until she found her balance. She weighed nothing, like she was made of bird bones and determination. "Thank you," she whispered, "just for him." They walked toward the church, her hand on his arm light as a butterfly. Behind them, the cage stood empty, its door hanging open like a question nobody wanted to answer. McAllister grabbed Jake's shoulder, spinning him around. "You think you've won something here, saddle tramp?" Jake met his eyes steady. "I think I've paid my bid fair and square. Mr. McAllister?" $7. McAllister leaned close enough that Jake could smell the whiskey rot on his breath. "You just bought yourself a world of trouble for $7.40. The freight wagon hit another rut, throwing Jake's shoulder against the wooden slats. Eliza sat across from him in the wagon bed, her back straight despite the jolting. Tom Warren spat tobacco juice over the side every few minutes, regular as a church bell. The town was 2 miles behind them now, hidden by a rise covered in mesquite and prickly pear. Jake's mare followed behind, tied to the wagon, her head low in the heat. Everything he owned was in her saddlebags: a change of clothes, a dented tin cup, a whetstone for the knife he'd just given away. Everything except the $7.40 left on Polk's ledger. Eliza hadn't spoken since they'd left the church. She held the small poke Mrs. Garrett had pressed into her hands: cornmeal, salt, dried beans, 2 strips of jerky that looked tough as boot leather. Her fingers worked at the cloth bag's drawstring, pulling it tight, loosening it, pulling it tight again. "County line's about 3 hours," Warren said without turning around. "That's far as I go." Jake nodded, though Warren couldn't see it. 3 hours to figure out what came next. 3 hours sitting across from a woman whose last name he'd learned during a 10-minute ceremony: Eliza May Patterson Thornton. The minister had written it careful in the church register. The sun was starting its slide toward evening, painting the dust orange as marmalade. Eliza's shadow stretched across the wagon bed. She lifted her hand to push a strand of hair from her face, and Jake saw the raw marks around her wrist. Rope burns, maybe 2 days old, the skin purple-green at the edges. "You need water." Jake pulled his canteen from beside him. She looked at it, then at him. Her tongue touched her cracked lips. Yes, please." He unscrewed the cap, passed it over. Their fingers brushed hers cold despite the heat. She drank careful, small sips, not gulping like she wanted to. "Go on," Jake said. "There's a creek about 5 miles from the county line. Warren told me." She took one more swallow, then passed it back. "Thank you." The wagon wheel found another hole. Jake's teeth clicked together hard enough to hurt. Eliza caught herself against the sideboards, and he saw her wince. Ribs, maybe, or just everything hurting from 3 days in that cage. "Your brother?" Jake said. "Timothy. He talked about you at Rock Island." Her eyes snapped to his face. "He did?" "Said you taught him his letters. Said you could make Johnny cakes that tasted like Sunday morning after a week of hardtack." A sound escaped her, not quite laugh, not quite sob. "He always was partial to my cooking. Mama taught me before." She stopped, fingers tightening on the supply poke. "Fever took them. That's what Doc Harkins said, fever." Her voice went flat as hammered tin. "Funny how the fever only took folks whose land the judge wanted. Funny how it took them right after they refused his offers to buy." Warren spat again. The tobacco juice hit a rock with a wet splat. Jake wanted to say something about justice, about law, about how things ought to be. But ought to be didn't mean much out here. Instead, he said, "Timothy read from his Bible every night in the prison camp, kept men from losing their minds, kept me from it." "How long were you at Rock Island?" 2 years, 3 months, 11 days. The numbers came automatic. Got traded in a prisoner exchange finally, but the war was near over by then. Went home to find home wasn't there anymore. Ma died while I was gone. Neighbors said it was her heart. Pa lit out for California. Never sent word. House got sold for taxes. "So you drift." It wasn't a question, but Jake answered anyway. "Work when I can find it. Move on when I can't. Or when folks decide they don't want my kind around." Your kind. The kind that reminds them the war happened. The kind that's got nothing and nobody. Eliza looked down at her hands. "I had things. Had people. The judge took them all legal-like. Papers with official seals. Nobody to argue different when you're an orphan girl with no money for lawyers. The wagon slowed. Warren pulled the mules to a stop near a stand of cottonwoods that promised shade. Need to rest the animals. You folks can stretch your legs. Jake climbed down first. The ground felt strange after the wagon's constant motion. He offered Eliza his hand. She took it, but when her feet hit the dirt, her legs gave out like they were made of water. Jake caught her around the waist, held her until she steadied. Through the thin fabric of her dress, he could feel her ribs, sharp as a washboard. How long were you in that cage? 3 days. 3 nights. She pulled away slow, testing her balance like she was walking on ice. They let me out once a day for necessaries. Under guard, like I was going to run when I could barely stand. Jake's jaw tightened hard enough to ache. He walked to his mare, pulled the last strip of jerky from his saddlebag. Here. You need to eat. She took it, tore off a small piece with her teeth. The sun was behind her now, turning her tangled hair copper where it had pulled loose from its pins. She looked younger in this light, maybe 25, maybe less. Too young to have buried both parents and survived what came after. Why? She asked suddenly. Why? What? Why spend everything you had on a stranger? Jake looked out at the empty road. The dust settling in the still air, a hawk circled overhead, patient. You were counting? In the cage. I saw you counting breaths. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Same thing I did when the walls got too close at Rock Island, when the guards got mean. When the hunger got so bad I thought about eating my shoe leather. So you recognized a fellow lunatic. I recognized someone who wasn't broken yet. Bent, maybe, but not broken. She handed him back half the jerky. You eat some. They shared it in silence, standing in the shade of the cottonwoods. Warren watered his mules from a bucket, whistling something that might have been Lorena, if he could carry a tune. Jake's mare found some sparse grass, started cropping it with steady grinding sounds. Where will we go? Eliza asked. After the county line. There's an abandoned place I passed 2 months back, the Becker farm. Man died. Widow moved back east to live with her sister. Well's supposed to be good. Cabin needs work, but the walls are sound. How do you know? Slept in the barn one night. When I was passing through, nobody's claimed it yet, too far from town, too small for the big ranchers to bother with. And you think we can just take it? Homestead Act says we can claim it if we improve it, build it up, work the land. It's ours legal after 5 years. 5 years? She said it like she was tasting the words. I haven't thought 5 days ahead in 2 years. Warren climbed back on the wagon seat. Best move on. Want to make the county line before full dark. The Jake helped Eliza back up, noticing how she gripped his hand harder this time, trusting him with her weight. They settled in the wagon bed as it lurched forward. The sun continued its fall, painting everything the color of dried blood. I can work, Eliza said suddenly, urgent. I can cook, sew, tend garden. I can read and write and do figures. I can teach children their letters if there's any nearby. I'm not dead weight. Mr. Thornton? Jake, just Jake. He met her eyes. And I know you're not dead weight. You don't know anything about me except I was in a cage. I know you didn't beg. Not once. All those people watching, throwing coins, saying terrible things. And you never begged. That tells me plenty. She turned her face away. But not before Jake saw her eyes fill. The wagon rolled on. Warren spat. The mare followed patient behind. The county line was marked by a wooden sign, shot full of holes and weathered to silver gray. Warren pulled up. This is far as I go. Jake jumped down, helped Eliza to the ground. Her legs held better this time. He untied his mare, checked the saddle cinch. Everything they owned fit in saddlebags and one small poke. Obliged for the ride, Jake told Warren. Warren looked down at them from the wagon seat, his weathered face unreadable. Creek's that way. Through those willows, Becker Place is a day's walk northwest. Follow the creek until you see a lightning-struck oak, then head due west. He gathered his reins, then stopped, reached under the seat, pulled out an old Navy Colt wrapped in oilcloth. This was my boy's. Died at Shiloh. You might need it. Jake took the gun, feeling its weight heavier than memory. lighter than responsibility. I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. Warren clicked to his mules. You treat that girl right, you hear? She's been through enough. The wagon rolled away, dust rising red in the sunset. Jake and Eliza stood at the side of the road, watching until it disappeared over a rise. Well, Mrs. Thornton, Jake said, testing the words. Guess we better find that creek. She looked at him sideways, something almost like a smile ghosting across her face. That's the first time anybody's called me that. Better get used to it. They started walking. Jake leading the mare, Eliza carrying their supplies. The willows were closer than they looked, and they could hear water running over rocks, sweet as a promise. Eliza stumbled on a root hidden in the gathering dark. Jake caught her arm. This time she didn't pull away. Jake. Yeah. What if someone's already claimed the Becker place? What if... She stopped. They both heard it at the same time. Horses, coming fast from the direction of town. Jake pulled Eliza behind the willows, his hand going to the Navy Colt. The gun was loaded, he'd checked. 6 shots. His hand found the grip. Steady now. The hoofbeats grew louder. 3 horses, maybe 4, coming hard. The horses thundered past without slowing, dust cloud visible through the willow branches. Jake counted 3 riders heading west, moving fast enough their horses would be blown within the hour. Not following them, not yet. His thumb eased off the Colt's hammer. Eliza's breathing slowed beside him, her hand loosening its grip on his sleeve. The fabric was damp where she'd held it. Neither moved until the hoofbeats faded to nothing. Could have been anybody, Jake said. Could have been, but her voice said she didn't believe it any more than he did. They pushed through the willows to find the creek running clear over smooth stones. Jake's mare went straight to the water, drinking deep. Eliza knelt upstream from the horse, cupped water in her hands, splashed her face. The dirt came away in streaks, revealing sunburned cheeks, a scatter of freckles across her nose like cinnamon on cream. Jake filled the canteen, then found a flat spot in the grass for their camp. No fire tonight smoke would mark their position like a flag. They had jerky, cornmeal, dried beans that needed soaking. Not much for a wedding supper, but more than he'd had most nights. Eliza sat on a fallen cottonwood log, working the pins from her hair. It fell past her shoulders, tangled and dusty, the color of wheat ready for harvest. She tried to work her fingers through it, winced when they caught in the knots. Creek's right there if you want to wash proper, Jake said, then turned his back, studying the Navy Colt, with more attention than it needed. He heard her stand, heard boot steps on stone, the splash of water. The gun was old but well-maintained. Warren's boy had known how to care for his tools, each chamber loaded, caps secure. Jake checked the action, smooth as butter. This plant here, Eliza's voice came from behind him. The one with the yellow flowers, it's good for eating. Jake turned. She stood knee-deep in the creek, her skirt hiked up and tied in a knot, pointing at a cluster of plants on the bank. Her calves were pale as milk where the sun hadn't touched them. That's just mustard weed. Wild mustard. The leaves are bitter but filling. The seeds can be ground for seasoning. She waded closer, water swirling around her legs. My mother taught me. She learned from her mother, who learned from the Caddo women when they still lived here. She pulled several plants up by the roots, examined them careful-like. These 2 lambs' quarters, like spinach but hardier. And look, she pointed to a low-growing plant. Purslane, sour but good for you. You know all these plants. I know what keeps people alive. She came out of the water, her bare feet pale against the dark grass. That wasn't pride talking earlier. I really can be useful. Jake watched her lay the plants on a flat stone, sorting leaves from stems with quick, sure movements. Her hands knew this work. Never thought you weren't useful. She looked up at him sharp. You don't know me? Jake Thornton? I know enough. What if I told you the judge was right? What if I did steal from him? Jake considered, watching her face in the fading light. Did you? Every chance I got? Food mostly. Sometimes money from his coat pocket when he'd been drinking. Once I took a whole ham from his smokehouse. Her chin lifted like she was ready for judgment. He owed me more than that for 2 years' labor without pay. Then I'd say you took wages owed. She studied his face like she was looking for the trick. You really believe that I believe a man who'd put a woman in a cage would lie about why? She went back to sorting plants, but her shoulders had eased some. Jake noticed her hands rough from work but steady, competent. She found more edibles along the creek bank, wild onion, no bigger than marbles. Some kind of root she called Jerusalem artichoke. Within 20 minutes she'd gathered enough to make the cornmeal and jerky into something resembling a meal. Can't cook it without fire, Jake said. Don't need to. She mixed creek water with cornmeal in the tin cup from his saddlebag, added torn jerky and crushed plants. Wrap it in these big leaves. Let it sit. By morning it'll be soft enough to eat. My father learned this from the Comanche when he traded with them, before they got pushed onto the reservation. Your father knew Comanche. He traded horses with them when I was little. Said they were good people, just trying to live like anybody else. Her voice carried something dark. Said the same about most folks until they proved different. Then the judge proved different. The sun had set completely now, the first stars showing between the cottonwood branches. Jake hobbled his mare so she could graze without wandering. The night sounds started crickets, a screech owl in the distance, something splashing in the creek that might have been a beaver. Your turn, Eliza said. My turn for what? To teach me something. You know this land. I know plants. But you know how to read the country. Show me. Jake looked around in the growing dark, eyes adjusting, pointed to marks on the cottonwood bark, pale scratches about head height. Bear sign, black bear, from the height. Probably from last season the sap's already dried. So we should move. No, bears are mostly scared of people, but it's good to know they're around. He showed her other signs, deer tracks in the mud, deep and splayed from running peach. The difference between coyote and dog prints, coyote's more oval, claws always showing. How to tell direction from the stars when clouds covered the moon. See the Big Dipper there? The two stars on the cup's edge point to the North Star. Always. Never fails. Eliza traced the pattern with her finger against the sky. The escaped slaves called it the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd, north to freedom. You sound like you admire them. Don't you? Taking that kind of chance, walking into the unknown with nothing but hope in the North Star? Jake thought about the $7 he'd spent, the empty road ahead, the woman beside him who was still mostly stranger. Yeah, I reckon I do. They sat quiet for a spell. The mare snorted, shifted her weight. Somewhere in the willows, a whippoorwill called. Another answered. I can read, Eliza said suddenly. But I saw you looking at Warren's sign. You can't, can you? Not well, anyway. Heat crept up Jake's neck, even in the cool night air. Know my letters some. Can sign my name. Never had much schooling. The war came when I was 16. I could teach you, if you wanted. In exchange for what? She turned to look at him straight on, starlight caught in her gray eyes. For treating me like a person instead of property. Seems like a fair trade. Jake pulled a stick from the ground, handed it to her. Show me. She smoothed a patch of dirt with her palm, started drawing letters by feel. A makes the sound at the start of apple. B for bear, see? You already know bears. Her voice took on that teacher tone, patient and clear. C for creek. Jake copied her letters, his rough attempts probably looking childish next to hers. She didn't laugh, just corrected his grip on the stick, showed him how to make the curves smoother. My students were mostly younger than you, she said. Farm children, 7, 8 years old. Their parents paid in eggs and vegetables, sometimes a chicken at Christmas. Her voice went soft. I miss them. Little Sarah Hawkins had just learned to write her name. Maybe you'll teach again. Maybe. She drew more letters. Your turn. How do you know when weather's coming? Jake pointed to his mare, barely visible in the darkness. Watch her. Right now she's calm, grazing easy. Storm coming. She'll face her rump to the wind. Eat fast like she knows food might get scarce. Morning of a storm, she'll be restless, pawing ground. What else? Birds go quiet before a bad storm. Flies bite more. Leaves show their undersides when the pressure changes. He picked up a cottonwood leaf, turned it over to show her the pale underside, though it was too dark to see proper. My grandmother swore her bones ached before rain. Thought she was fooling until I got older. Started feeling it myself. Your bones ache. Sometimes. Got busted up pretty bad at Rock Island. Guards didn't take kindly to us trying to escape. You tried to escape. 3 times. Third time they broke 2 ribs and my left hand. Fingers still don't bend right. He flexed his hand, the 2 smallest fingers staying partially curled. Would have kept trying if the war hadn't ended. Eliza drew something in the dirt. Not a letter. Lines crossing. Bars. I thought about it, she said. Escaping? But where would I go? The judge owned the law, owned the town. A woman alone on the prairie. She shrugged. Seemed like trading one cage for another. And now I'm a married woman traveling with her husband. Respectable. Legal. She looked at him sideways. Strange how a piece of paper and some words in front of witnesses changes everything. Not everything. We're still broke. Still heading nowhere particular with barely any food. But we're doing it as free people. That counts for something. Jake wanted to tell her she'd been free the moment she walked out of that cage, but then he remembered how folks had looked at her before versus after she took his name. The paper mattered. The witnesses mattered. The world was built that way. Tomorrow we'll reach the Becker place, he said. Might be nothing but broken boards and dust. Or it might be home. You always this optimistic? No, she stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. But I spent 3 days in a cage expecting to die badly. Everything else feels like borrowed time. Might as well hope. She walked to where he'd spread his blanket, started to lie down on the grass beside it. Take the blanket, Jake said. It's yours. It's ours now, and you need it more. Your bones are closer to the skin than mine. She hesitated, then wrapped herself in the worn wool. It smelled like horse and sweat and trail dust, but it was warm. Jake stretched out on the grass, using his saddle for a pillow. The ground was hard but not cold, and he'd slept on worse. Prison bunks, barn floors, that time in a ditch when the rain wouldn't stop. Jake. Yeah. What you said to Warren about possibility. Did you mean it? He stared up at the stars, thinking how to answer true. My whole life since the war's been about just getting through the day. Next meal, next job, next town. Never thought past that. But when I saw you in that cage, not broken, not begging, I thought maybe there was another way to live. What way? Building something instead of just surviving. She was quiet so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I'd like to build something. What kind of something? I don't know. A garden. A school. A place where people could just beat. Jake turned his head to look at her. She was lying on her side, facing him, the blanket pulled to her chin. In the starlight. She looked younger. Hopeful, maybe. We could try, he said. We could fail. Already been failing my whole life. Might as well fail at something worth trying. She almost smiled. He could see it in the way her eyes changed. Is that what we are? Something worth trying? Before Jake could answer, the mare's head shot up. Shipong. She stopped grazing. Ears pricked forward. Nostrils flared. Jake's hand found the colt. Eliza sat up some. The blanket falling from her shoulders. The mare snorted, stamped her foot, pulled against her hobbles. Something was moving in the willows, something big, and it wasn't alone. The willow branches parted. A black bear emerged, maybe 300 pounds, its eyes catching starlight like copper pennies. Jake's finger found the trigger. The bear huffed, testing the air with its broad snout. Behind him, Eliza had gone still as stone, not even breathing. The bear padded to the creek. 20 feet from their camp. It drank, water dripping silver from its muzzle. Jake's mare pulled against her hobbles, trying to back away. But she didn't bolt. Good horse. Steady when it counted. The bear lifted its head, looked directly at them. Jake kept the colt level, hoping he wouldn't have to waste a bullet, hoping the bear was just passing through. It sniffed the air again, then turned and crashed back through the willows, heading upstream. The sounds faded gradual-like into the night. Jake lowered the gun. His shirt stuck to his back with sweat that had nothing to do with the temperature. That was a bear. Eliza whispered. That was... It didn't attack. We didn't have anything it wanted. No food smell. No cubs to protect. Jake holstered the Colt. Just thirsty, like everything else out here. Eliza pulled the blanket back around her shoulders. She was shaking now, not from cold. Jake recognized that shake from the war. Body trying to burn off fear after danger passed. Hey! Jake moved closer, careful not to touch her. Count with me. 4 in. She sucked air through her teeth. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now out for 4. They breathed together until her shaking stopped. The mare settled too, went back to grazing like bears were everyday occurrences. Sorry, Eliza said. Nothing to be sorry for. It's just in the cage. There were rats. At night. They'd come for the food people threw, and they'd... She pulled the blanket tighter. They'd run over my feet, bite at my shoes. I couldn't get away from them. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and long. Jake looked up. Clouds were building in the west, eating stars like spilled ink. Storm coming, he said. We need better shelter. They found a cut bank under some cottonwoods, deep enough to keep the worst rain off. Jake moved the mare close, under the thickest branches. By the time he got back to Eliza, the first fat drops were falling, cold on his neck. Lightning lit the sky white as noon. In the flash, Jake saw Eliza's face, eyes wide, jaw clenched hard. Thunder followed, close enough to feel in his chest bones. Just a storm, he said. I know, but when the next lightning came, she jerked like she'd been slapped. Jake remembered that kind of flinch from prison. Guards walking past, never knowing if they'd keep walking or stop at your bunk. What did he do to you? The question came out before Jake could stop it. The judge. Eliza pulled her knees to her chest. Which time? The rain came harder now, drumming on the leaves above. Some got through, cold drops finding their way down Jake's collar. First time was the day after my parents died. Judge came to the house with papers. Said my father owed him $600. Had a note with father's signature. She picked at a thread on her skirt. Signature was perfect. Too perfect. Father's hand shook the last year from palsy. Couldn't write smooth anymore. Forged. Of course forged. But who'd believe me over a judge? Lightning again, turning everything white-blue for a heartbeat. He said I could work off the debt. Housekeeping. Cooking. Teaching his children their letters. Said it would take 2 years, but it didn't. Every time I got close to paying it off, there'd be new expenses. Room and board, though I slept in the pantry. Medicine when I got sick from spoiled meat he'd feed me. Damages when his son broke a window and blamed me. Her laugh was bitter as the wild mustard. The debt grew instead of shrinking, like trying to empty a bucket with holes in the bottom. Rain ran off the cut bank in streams. The mare stood patient, water running off her back. Jake pulled off his jacket, held it over their heads to block the worst of the drips. Then I found out about the water rights, Eliza continued. Overheard him talking to his lawyer. My father's land had senior water rights from 1851, worth 10 times what the land itself was worth. Judge had been planning it for years, waiting for the right moment. So you started stealing. I started surviving. Food, when he'd forget to feed me. Money when he was drunk and wouldn't remember. Saved almost enough for a train ticket east. Her voice dropped to barely audible over the rain. He found my hiding place. That's when he had me arrested for theft. His word against mine. Who do you think the sheriff believed thunder crashed directly overhead? Eliza pressed back against the dirt bank. In the lightning flash, Jake saw tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. 3 days ago, Lord. Was it only 3 days he came to the jail? Said he'd drop the charges if I signed the water rights over. When I refused, he had them build that cage. Said I'd be sold to cover my debt. Said whoever bought me could do whatever they wanted, and it would be legal. Jake's free hand curled into a fist, knuckles white. Someone should have stopped him. Who? The sheriff's his cousin. The mayor owes him money. The minister's too scared to speak up, has a family to feed. She wiped her face with her sleeve, though more rain kept coming. Town folks just wanted their entertainment. Something to talk about besides drought and cattle prices. The rain slowed to a steady patter. Jake's arm ached from holding the jacket up, but he didn't lower it. My turn, he said. You want to know my ghosts? She nodded, looking at him sideways through the curtain of rain. I was 15 when the war started, 16 when I enlisted. Thought I was a man. He shifted the jacket to his other hand. First battle, I wet myself, shot my rifle into the air. Too scared to aim at anything that looked back. Boy next to me. Couldn't have been 14. Got his jaw shot off. Lived for 3 hours, trying to scream through the hole where his mouth used to be. Lightning flickered, distant now. Eliza's hand found his in the dark, her fingers cold and wet, but steady. Got captured at Stones River, New Year's Day, 1863, marched us to Rock Island, Illinois, Union prison camp on an island in the Mississippi, though. 12,000 of us crammed in barracks, built for 3,000. Dysentery killed more than bullets ever did. Froze in winter, men lost fingers and toes to frostbite. Baked in summer, no shade, no proper water. Guards shot anyone who crossed the deadline. This rope strung around the camp perimeter, 30 feet from the fence. How did you survive? Your brother helped. His Bible readings gave us something to think about besides the smell and the hunger. Some men just gave up, stopped eating, stopped drinking, died in their bunks with their eyes open. But Timothy kept reading every night, gave us a reason to wake up. Tomorrow, he'd say, tomorrow might be the day we go home. He never told me in his letters. Probably didn't want to worry you. Talked about you all the time, though. Said you were the smartest person he knew. Said you could have gone to university if they took women. Said you made the best apple butter in Texas. He said that every chance he got. That's why when you asked my name through those bars, I knew who you were. Same gray eyes, same way of holding your chin up when the world's trying to push it down. The rain had nearly stopped, just drips from the leaves now. Water gurgled in the creek, running higher and faster. I couldn't save him, Jake said. Fever took him quick. Nothing anybody could do. But when I saw you in that cage, it was like getting a second chance. To do something right. To save someone. To do something that mattered. First thing that mattered since the war. They sat quiet while the storm moved east, thunder fading to distant grumbles. Water dripped steady from leaves, plopped into puddles. The mare shook herself, sending spray that caught them both. We're a pair. Aren't we? Eliza said. Two broken people trying to play house. Maybe that's what it takes. Broken people know how to survive. Might be we can figure out how to do more than that. You really think we can build something real? Jake thought about the Becker place, abandoned cabin, untended land. Nothing special except it was empty and they were here. My mother used to say even the biggest oak started as an acorn that held its ground. Wise woman. She had her moments. Also used to say God helps those who help themselves. Then she'd help herself to an extra piece of pie. That got almost a laugh from Eliza. Storms passed. We should try to sleep. Long walk tomorrow. Eliza lay back on the damp ground, pulling the wet blanket around her. Jake stretched out beside her, not touching but close enough to share what little warmth they had. The clouds were breaking up, stars showing through like promises. Jake, yeah, what if we get to the Becker place and someone's already claimed it? Then we keep walking. Where? Wherever you want. We're free. Remember, can go anywhere. Together. That was the deal. Wasn't it for better or worse? She turned on her side, facing him. Water dripped from her hair onto the ground between them. Most people just say those words. Don't mean them. I'm not most people. No, she said soft as the rain ending. You're not. An owl called from the cottonwoods. Another answered from across the creek. Jake's eyes were getting heavy, that bone-deep tired that comes after fear. When Eliza spoke again, I'm glad it was you. What? Who spent his last $7? I'm glad it was you. Jake wanted to say something back, something that matched the weight of her words. But before he could find it, he heard horses again, this time from the west, this time stopping at the creek crossing, voices carrying on the night air. Jake, Eliza whispered, her hand finding his arm. Someone's coming. The voices were clearer now. 3 men. Maybe 4. and one of them was saying Judge Morrison's name. Jake pulled Eliza deeper under the cut bank. The horses splashed through the creek 3, maybe 4. Men's voices carried on the wet air. Words broken by distance, but the tone clear. They were hunting. Tracks end at the water. Can't have gone far in this weather. Jake recognized McAllister's growl, rough as gravel in a pan. The Colt's grip felt slick in his palm. 6 bullets. 4 men. Maybe more. Not enough if shooting started. Eliza pressed against his back, making herself small. Her hand gripped his shirt hard enough that her knuckles pressed into his spine through the wet fabric. Boot steps on the bank above them. Dirt cascaded down, pattering on Jake's hat. Someone was standing directly overhead. Jake could smell tobacco and wet wool. See anything, Dawson? Nothing. Too dark. And this rain's washed out any tracks. A match flared. The smell of cigarette smoke drifted down. Jake's mare stood 10 feet away, visible if anyone looked close. But she stayed still, head low, just another shadow among the cottonwoods. Judge wants her back, McAllister said. Says the marriage ain't legal. Performed under duress. Thought the judge wanted her sold. Changed his mind when he sobered up. Seems that girl knows where some important papers are hidden. Papers the judge needs before the federal marshal starts sniffing around. What kind of papers? Kind that could get a man hanged if the wrong people saw them. Jake felt Eliza's grip tighten. Her breath came faster against his neck, warm and damp. He reached back, found her hand, squeezed once, steady. What about the drifter? Judge doesn't care what happens to him. Accident, coyotes, creek flooding. Things happen on the prairie. And boot steps moved along the bank, testing the edge. Jake tracked them by sound. 4 men spread out, searching the willows. One splashed into the creek, checking the far side. Another headed downstream toward where they'd first stopped. Found something. The shout came from downstream. Campsite. Still warm coals under these rocks they tried to hide a fire. The boots above them moved away fast. Jake counted to 20, then crept forward to look. 4 horses stood in the creek, reins trailing in the water. The men had gathered around the remains of someone else's old camp, arguing. Could be theirs. Could be anybody's. No. Look, fresh woman's boot prints. Jake slid back under the cut bank. They'll figure out we're close. Need to move. Where? Deeper into the willows first. Then we circle back. Head for town. Town, are you crazy? Listen, they expect us to run. So we don't. We go to Millbrook Junction. It's closer than the Becker place. There's real law there. A marshal who's not the judge's cousin. They crawled out, staying low. Jake led the mare by her bridle, moving slow to keep her quiet. The willow thicket was dense. Branches catching at their clothes, scratching exposed skin. Mosquitoes found them immediately, whining in Jake's ears. Behind them, McAllister cursed. Check the whole creek. They didn't sprout wings. Jake found a deer trail leading into the thickest part of the willows. They followed it, bent double, until they reached a small clearing where lightning had knocked down an old cottonwood. The root ball stood up like a wall, creating a hollow behind it. They crouched there, the mare's head hanging over them. Jake could feel Eliza shaking cold, fear or both. He pulled her against his side, sharing what warmth he had. Branches cracked nearby. Someone was beating through the willows with a stick, not 20 feet away. Waste of time, Dawson's voice, maybe 30 feet away. Can't see nothing in this tangle. Keep looking. McAllister sounded closer. Judge promised $50 to whoever finds them. $50. More money than Jake had seen in years. Enough to tempt good men to do bad things. The mare shifted her weight. Her hoof came down on a dry branch. The crack sounded like a rifle shot in the quiet night. What was that? There, something moved. Jake thumbed back the Colt's hammer. The click soft but audible. Eliza pressed her face into his shoulder. Footsteps came closer. Slow. Careful. Jake could hear the man breathing, heavy from pushing through the brush. A cottonmouth slithered out from under the root ball, thick as Jake's wrist. It moved toward the footsteps, silent as death itself. Sweet Lord Almighty! Dawson's scream split the night. Snake. There's a snake. Gunfire erupted. 3 shots, wild, panicked, men shouting, horses spooked and splashing in the creek. Did you get it? I don't know. Where'd it go? Forget the snake. Was anyone there? Just the snake. McAllister nearly stepped on the cursed thing. Jake felt Eliza's body relax slightly. The cottonmouth had saved them. Disappeared now into the underbrush. "This is useless," another voice said. "They could be miles away by now, or drowned in the creek for all we know, or hiding 50 feet from us." Laughing, McAllister snarled. "In this dark with snakes, I'm not getting bit for $50. The judge can come look himself if he wants them so bad." Jake heard them, moving away. Arguing. The horses splashed back across the creek. McAllister's voice carried clear. "Fine. We'll check the Becker place at first light. If they're not there, we'll watch the roads. They have to go somewhere." Hoofbeats faded east. Jake counted to 100 before he lowered the hammer on the colt. His hand ached from gripping it. "They're gone," he whispered. Eliza lifted her head from his shoulder. "For now." What papers was he talking about? She was quiet for a moment. "Land titles, I think. Forged ones. I saw them once when I was cleaning his study. Names of families who died of fever. Documents dated before their deaths. Signing land over to the judge. You could prove he killed them. I could prove he stole their land. Murder would be harder. But the federal marshals have been looking for evidence. That's probably why he's so desperate to get me back. He knows I saw them." "But you don't have the papers?" "He doesn't know that. And now he can't risk it." They waited another hour before moving. The moon had set, leaving only starlight to navigate by. Jake led them upstream, away from the road, following the creek through thick brush and over slippery stones. Eliza held onto his belt, trusting him to find the way. Dawn was graying the eastern sky when they finally stopped. They'd made maybe 3 miles, less than half what they needed. Jake's mare was limping slightly, favoring her left front hoof. "Stone bruise," Jake said, checking the hoof. "She needs rest." "We both do." Eliza's dress was torn in 3 places from the brush. Her hair a wild tangle with twigs caught in it, but she was already scanning the area, looking for plants. "They're cattails. Young ones are good eating." She found cattail roots, tender and white when peeled, and more of the lamb's quarters. "Can't make a fire," Jake said. "Don't need one." She mixed creek water with the last of the cornmeal, adding crushed cattail root and the wild greens. "Won't taste like much, but it'll keep us going." They ate the cold mush in silence, sitting on a fallen log as the sun climbed higher. Birds started their morning calls, meadowlarks, sparrows, a mockingbird running through its repertoire. "They'll be at the Becker place by now," Jake said. "Will they wait for us?" "McAllister might. He's stubborn as a mule with a toothache." Jake rubbed his jaw, feeling 3 days of stubble. "But the others won't want to lose a day's work. They'll head back, report to the judge. Who'll send more men? Maybe. Or maybe he'll figure we're gone for good. Mexico maybe, or California." Eliza looked at him sideways. "You don't believe that?" "No." "So what do we do?" Jake stood, tested the mare's hoof again. She'd be all right with an easy pace. "We go to Millbrook Junction like I said. It's closer than the Becker place, and there's law there. Real law, not the judge's bought men." "You think they'll help?" "I think they'll at least listen. And there's a minister there who might remember us. Write a letter confirming our marriage is legal. That's federal law. What's legal in one place has to be recognized everywhere. Then what? Then we disappear. Head south maybe, or west. Somewhere the judge's reach doesn't extend." Eliza stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. All right. I trust you." She said it simple, like stating the weather. "You spent everything you had to free me. I figure you won't stop now." They reached the road after noon, checking careful before crossing. No fresh horse tracks. Jake's mare was moving better, the rest having helped. Eliza walked beside him, one hand on the saddle for balance. Millbrook Junction appeared by late afternoon, a cluster of buildings around a crossroads. Bigger than Clearwater, but not by much. The main street had a general store, saloon, small hotel, and a church with a white steeple that needed paint. People stared as they walked down the street. Jake knew how they looked: dusty, torn, exhausted, like trouble, like folks running from something. The marshal's office was a small building next to the hotel. Jake tied the mare to the hitching post. "Wait here," he told Eliza. "No." She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. "We do this together." The marshal was a thin man with gray whiskers and tired eyes. He looked up from his paperwork as they entered. "Help you folks. My name's Jake Thornton. This is my wife, Eliza. We need to report a crime." The marshal's eyebrows rose. "What kind of crime? Kidnapping, false imprisonment, attempted sale of a free woman?" Jake kept his voice steady. "By Judge Morrison of Clearwater." The marshal set down his pen careful-like. "Those are serious accusations." "Yes, sir, they are." "You got proof?" Eliza stepped forward. "I'm the proof. 3 days in a cage in the town square. Dozens of witnesses. A bill of sale that Polk the auctioneer was drawing up." The marshal studied them both. "Judge Morrison's a powerful man. Has friends in high places. Does that make him above the law?" "No, but it makes this complicated." The marshal stood, walked to the window. "You two really married?" "Yesterday." Reverend Garrett performed the ceremony in Clearwater, under duress, under witness of half the town, what? Jake said. "We've got our marriage certificate if you need to see it." Eliza pulled the paper from her pocket. Damp and creased, but legal. The marshal examined it, handed it back. "All right. I'll wire the federal marshal in Austin. Meanwhile, you folks need somewhere safe to stay." "We've got no money." The door burst open. McAllister stood there, dust-covered and angry, Dawson behind him. "Marshal, we need these two arrested. They're thieves and the woman's an escaped prisoner." The marshal's hand moved to his gun. "That's so funny. They just told me a different story. Why don't you tell me yours? Mr. McAllister? Start with why you're chasing married folks through my jurisdiction." McAllister's hand dropped to his gun. The marshal's cleared leather first, barrel pointed steady at McAllister's chest. "Nobody pulls iron in my office," the marshal said. "Hands where I can see them." McAllister raised his hands slow, knuckles white with rage. "Marshal Peterson, these two are fugitives from justice." "From what getting married?" Peterson kept his gun level. "I got their wedding certificate right here, legal and binding, signed by a minister. Obtained under false pretenses. The woman's a thief. Convicted by what court I don't recall any trial." Dawson shifted his weight, boots scraping on the plank floor. "Judge Morrison says..." "Judge Morrison ain't marshal here. I am." Peterson's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that came from years of keeping peace in rough towns. "Now, Mr. McAllister, you got any federal warrants?" "No, but any legal documents saying these folks committed a crime?" McAllister's jaw worked like he was chewing rawhide. "The judge will wire you. Then I'll wait for his wire. Meanwhile, these folks are free citizens in my jurisdiction." Peterson holstered his gun but kept his hand near it. "You're welcome to wait at the hotel, or head back to Clearwater. Your choice." McAllister looked between Jake and Eliza, his face dark as a thundercloud. "This ain't over." "It is for today," Peterson said. "Doors behind you." McAllister stormed out, Dawson following, through the window. Jake watched them mount their horses, heading for the saloon. Their horses were lathered with sweat, ribs showing the strain of hard riding. "They'll be back," Jake said. "Probably." Peterson sat back down at his desk, pulled out a ledger. "But not today. Mrs. Cooper runs a boarding house 2 streets over. Tell her I sent you. She'll give you a room on credit until we sort this out." "We can't pay." "Didn't ask you to. Federal marshal will want to talk to you both. Best you're rested and cleaned up when he gets here." Peterson started writing in his ledger. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll see what Judge Morrison has to say for himself." Mrs. Cooper's boarding house smelled like lye soap and boiled cabbage. She was a narrow woman with steel gray hair pulled tight enough to stretch her face. She looked them up and down, took in their torn clothes, the exhaustion written in every line. "Marshal sent you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Rooms at the top of the stairs, 3rd door, wash basins full, suppers at 6 sharp." She handed Jake a skeleton key. "No visitors after dark, no liquor, no tobacco in the rooms." The room was small but clean. Iron bedstead with a cornhusk mattress, washstand with a chipped pitcher, single wooden chair. Eliza sat on the bed's edge, then fell backward, arms spread wide. "A real bed," she said to the ceiling. "With a real roof." Jake poured water into the basin, splashed his face. In the small mirror, he looked like a stranger, hollow cheeks, red-rimmed eyes, 3 days of beard going gray at the edges, though he was only 32. "You should wash first," he told Eliza. "I'll wait in the hall. Don't go far. Just outside the door." He stood in the narrow hallway, listening to water splashing, fabric rustling. Down the hall, someone was singing a hymn, voice cracked with age, rock of ages, slow and mournful. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But Jake's hand stayed near the Colt. When Eliza opened the door, her face was clean, hair pulled back wet. The torn places in her dress showed bruises on her arms, purple-green like old pennies. "Your turn," she said. The water in the basin was gray when he finished. Jake scraped 3 days of beard off with his knife, careful of the dull edge. His hands shook slightly, exhaustion catching up now that they'd stopped moving. Supper was beans and cornbread, but it was hot and there was plenty. 2 other boarders ate in silence, a traveling preacher and a woman in widow's black who kept her eyes on her plate. Jake and Eliza sat close, their shoulders touching. "Heard there was some excitement," the preacher said, mopping bean juice with cornbread. "Something about Judge Morrison from Clearwater." Jake kept eating. Eliza's hand found his under the table. "Judge Morrison's a godly man," the preacher continued. "Supports the church generous-like. Built them a new bell tower last year." "Built it with stolen money," the widow said, not looking up. The preacher's face went red as fresh beef. "That's slanderous talk. That's truth talk." The widow stood, taking her plate. "I knew the Patterson family. Good people, Christian people. Then they died sudden and the judge got their land. Funny how the Lord's plan always seems to benefit rich men." She left. The preacher muttered something about heathens and followed. Jake and Eliza finished eating alone. That night, they lay on opposite edges of the narrow bed, carefully not touching. The cornhusk mattress rustled with every movement. Jake could hear Eliza breathing, not quite asleep. Outside, a dog barked. Someone laughed. In the saloon down the street, the sound carrying on the still air. Jake. "Yeah. What if the federal marshal doesn't believe us? Then we run." "Where?" "Mexico, maybe. Or California. Somewhere far." She turned toward him. In the moonlight through the window, her eyes looked silver instead of gray. "Is that what you want, to keep running?" "I want you safe." "That's not an answer." Jake stared at the ceiling, watching shadows from the tree outside dance across the plaster. "I'm tired of running. Been doing it since the war ended. Town to town, job to job, never staying long enough for the dust to settle." "You matter to me." The words sat between them in the dark, fragile as spun glass. "When I saw you in that cage," Jake said, "I saw myself. Trapped. Not by bars, but by emptiness. Like I was walking through life already dead. Just hadn't laid down yet. And now I want to build something. Don't know what exactly, but something real. Something that lasts longer than a season." Eliza's hand found his in the dark. Her fingers were rough from work, steady. The Becker place. If it's still empty. If McAllister hasn't burned it down for spite. Jake squeezed her fingers. "It's not much. Cabin needs work. Well needs cleaning. Land's been fallow for 2 years. But it could be ours. Could be. If we can prove up on it. 5 years of working it, making improvements. Then it's ours free and clear." They lay quiet, hands linked between them. The saloon had gone quiet. Even the dog had stopped barking. "Tell me about it," Eliza said. "The Becker place?" 2 rooms. Main room with a stone fireplace. Smaller room for sleeping. Roof's mostly good tar paper over wood shingles. Windows face east, catch the morning sun. Is there space for a garden? South side of the house. Mrs. Becker had one. You can still see the rows even with the weeds. Soil's good, black and rich. No alkali. Water from the well's sweet, no sulfur taste. Trees. 2 cottonwoods for shade. Some mesquite for firewood. That lightning struck Oak. About a quarter-mile west, that's the landmark folks use. Eliza turned fully toward him, her face close enough he could feel her breath. We could make it work. Be hard. No money for supplies. Have to hunt for meat. Gather what we can. I'd need to find work at neighboring ranches for cash money. I can take in sewing. Teach children if any families are near. I saw a notice in the store they need a teacher for the county school. Might be months before we have real money, but we'd be free. Free and hungry. Better than caged and fed. Jake studied her face in the moonlight. You really mean that? Every word. A board creaked in the hallway. Jake's hand went to the Colt on the bedside table. Footsteps passed their door, continued to the next room. The preacher, from the sound of his wheezing. Try to sleep, Jake said. Tomorrow we'll know more. But sleep wouldn't come. Jake lay awake listening to the night sounds, planning. If they had to run, they'd need supplies. The mayor needed new shoes. They had no money, but maybe he could trade work for goods. Eliza's breathing had deepened into sleep. She'd turned toward him, one hand still holding his. In sleep. The tension left her face. She looked younger, softer, like someone who hadn't spent 3 days in a cage. Light was graying the window when Jake finally dozed. He woke to pounding on the door. Marshall wants you. Mrs. Cooper's voice carried through the wood. Says it's urgent. Jake pulled on his boots. Eliza was already up, trying to smooth her wrinkled dress. What time is it, she asked. Early, maybe 6.
Simple.
They hurried to the marshal's office. Peterson was there with another man older, wearing a federal badge. Trail dust still on his clothes. This is Marshal Coleman from Austin, Peterson said. Came in on the night stage. Coleman looked them over with sharp eyes that missed nothing. You're the Thorntons. Yes, sir. Got an interesting wire from Judge Morrison. Says you kidnapped his ward and stole valuable documents. Jake's stomach dropped like he'd stepped in a hole. That's not... Coleman held up a hand. Also got 3 wires from citizens in Clearwater, though seems half the town saw this young woman in a cage being auctioned off. That true? Yes, sir. Eliza said. 3 days and nights. And you? Coleman looked at Jake. Paid for her freedom. Paid for marriage. Freedom came with it. Coleman nodded slowly. Judge Morrison's been on our watch list for a while. Land deals that don't sit right. Dead folks with convenient wills. But we never had anyone willing to testify. I'll testify, Eliza said. I saw the forged documents. I know which families he cheated. That's a dangerous offer, young lady. It's a necessary one. Coleman studied her, then smiled slightly. All right. I'll need a full statement. Names, dates, everything you remember. What about McAllister? Jake asked. He's still in town. Mr. McAllister left about an hour ago, Peterson said. Heading back to Clearwater fast as his horse could run. To warn the judge, Jake said. Let him. Coleman's smile was cold as January. I've got federal warrants and a squad of rangers coming. Judge Morrison's days of playing king are over. It took 3 hours for Eliza to give her statement. She remembered everything: names, dates, amounts, the families who'd died, the papers she'd seen. Coleman wrote it all down in careful script. This is enough to start a federal investigation, he said when she finished. But you'll need to testify in court. Could take months. We'll be here, Jake said. Actually, that's not safe. Coleman stood. Judge has friends, some of them violent. You two need to disappear for a while. Where? That's up to you, but I'd suggest somewhere remote, somewhere the judge's men won't think to look. Jake met Eliza's eyes. She nodded slightly. We know a place, Jake said. Coleman handed Jake a paper. This is a voucher for supplies. Government will cover your expenses while you're witnesses. Get what you need and get gone. I'll send word when it's time for trial. Outside the marshal's office, Eliza took Jake's arm. The Becker place. If it's still empty, and if it's not, then we find another place. We're good at starting over. They walked to the general store. The voucher was for $50 more money than Jake had seen in years. They bought carefully flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, ammunition for the Colt, a new dress for Eliza, boots for Jake, his old ones held together with hope and twine, tools for building hammer, Nails, saw, axe. Heard you folks had some trouble, the store owner said, making change. Some, Jake agreed. Also heard Judge Morrison's in a powerful rage, offering $100 for information on where you've gone. Jake looked at Eliza. $100 would tempt a lot of people, even good ones. Guess we better make sure no one knows, Jake said. They loaded the supplies on Jake's mare, then bought a second horse, a sturdy bay gelding with part of the voucher money. Eliza had never ridden alone, but she climbed up, determined, jaw set. They left Millbrook Junction at noon, heading north toward the Becker place, but after a mile, Jake turned west instead. Wrong way, Eliza said. Right way for anyone watching. We'll circle back after dark. They rode through the afternoon heat, staying off main roads. Jake taught Eliza how to read the land, how to guide her horse with her knees, how to watch for danger. She learned fast, that same quiet determination that had kept her counting breaths in the cage. Near sunset, they stopped by a creek to water the horses. Jake was filling the canteens when he saw it fresh horse tracks. 3 riders, maybe 4, heading the same direction they were. Company, he told Eliza. She looked at the tracks, then at him. McAllister. Maybe. Or maybe just travelers. But they both knew better to us. The tracks were too fresh. Too purposeful. Someone was following. Someone who knew exactly where they were going. Jake knelt by the tracks, measuring their depth with his finger. The horses were carrying weight men and supplies, moving steady, but not rushing. The hoof prints overlapped in places, horses following single file. Men who knew how to track were trying not to be tracked themselves. We need to move, Jake said. Now. They mounted and turned south, away from the Becker place, away from their planned route. The sun dropped behind the hills, painting everything the color of dried blood. Jake led them into a dry wash where flash floods had carved deep channels. The sandy bottom would hide their tracks, at least for a while. Eliza's bay gelding stumbled on loose rocks. She caught herself on the saddle horn, knuckles white against the leather. You all right? Fine. But her voice came out tight. She was learning to ride while being hunted. They followed the wash for 2 miles before climbing out near a cluster of large boulders. Jake dismounted, climbed the highest rock. In the fading light, he could see dust rising to the north. 3 riders, maybe a mile back, following their original trail. They haven't figured out we turned, he told Eliza. Yet. They rode through full dark, navigating by stars. The Big Dipper pointed north, steady as always. The Becker place was northeast now, maybe 6 miles, but they'd have to circle wide. Approach from the west where no one would expect. Jake's mare started favoring her left front again. The stone bruise from yesterday made worse by the hard riding. They needed to rest, but where every shadow could hide McAllister's men, or worse. There! Eliza pointed. An abandoned line shack sat against a small hill, probably from some failed homestead. Half the roof had fallen in, but the walls still stood. They led the horses behind it, hidden from the road. Jake loosened the saddles but didn't remove them. Might need to run fast. They ate cold biscuits and jerky, washing it down with warm canteen water. Eliza sat close enough that Jake could feel her trembling exhaustion. Not fear this time. How did they know, she asked. About the Becker place. McAllister was there yesterday morning. Remember looking for us, probably asked around, found out about the abandoned cabin. Jake checked the Colt's chambers. Still loaded. Or maybe the judge has more friends than we thought. Money buys a lot of eyes and ears. We can't go there? Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Then where? Jake wanted to give her an answer. A plan, something solid. But all he had was the truth. I don't know. Eliza was quiet for a moment. Then, what about going back to Clearwater? Think about it. Coleman said he's got rangers coming. The judge is probably destroying evidence right now, maybe getting ready to run himself. Last thing he expects is us showing up. Jake studied her face in the starlight. You want to go back? Why? Because I know where those papers are. The real ones, not the forgeries. My father kept copies of everything. He hid them before he died. Where? In the schoolhouse. There's a false bottom in the teacher's desk. He showed me the night before he got sick. Her voice went flat. Said if anything happened to him, I should get them to the federal marshal. Why didn't you? Judge had me locked up the day after the funeral. Never got the chance. She stood, pacing in the small space. But they're still there. Have to be. Nobody's used that schoolhouse since I was arrested. And Jake thought about it. The schoolhouse on the edge of town, abandoned for 2 years. They could reach it by dawn if they rode steady. Get in, get the papers, get out before anyone knew they were there. It's dangerous, he said. Everything we do is dangerous. But this could end it. Really end it. Or get us killed. Jake. She knelt in front of him, took his hands. I'm tired of running. Tired of looking over my shoulder. If those papers can put the judge away. Don't we have to try? He looked at their joined hands. Her fingers were steady now. No trembling. She'd made her choice. All right, he said. We go back. They rode through the night, keeping to low ground, avoiding skylines. The moon rose late, a silver sliver that gave just enough light to navigate. Jake's mare was limping worse, but she kept going. Tough old girl. They reached Clearwater's outskirts as the eastern sky started graying. The town was quiet, even the saloon dark. They skirted the main street, approaching the schoolhouse from behind. The building sat alone on its rise, windows dark, door hanging crooked. Weeds had taken the yard, grown tall enough to hide a man, or 2 people sneaking in the back way. Jake forced the rear door. It opened with a shriek that sounded loud as a gunshot in the quiet morning. They led the horses inside, not ideal, but hidden. The classroom smelled like dust and mice and abandoned dreams. Eliza went straight to the teacher's desk, ran her hands along the underside. Here, she whispered. A click. A section of the bottom dropped down. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather portfolio. Eliza pulled it out, opened it carefully. Documents, deeds, receipts, all originals. All with proper dates and signatures. These prove everything, Betseba, she said. The original deeds, the real tax records, even receipts showing the judge was paid to look the other way while certain people got poisoned. We need to get these to Coleman. There's a telegraph office at the railroad depot. We could... The front door burst open. Judge Morrison stood there, pistol in hand. Behind him, McAllister and 2 other men, all armed. I thought you might come back here, the judge said. His voice was calm, almost pleased. Nostalgia is such a predictable weakness. Jake stepped in front of Eliza, hand on the Colt. Judge Morrison, come to do your own dirty work for once. Come to retrieve my property, both kinds. Morrison's eyes fixed on the portfolio. Those documents are stolen. These documents are evidence, Eliza said, stepping out from behind Jake. Evidence that you killed my parents, killed all of them. Prove it. I don't have to. The federal marshal will... Morrison smiled, ugly and confident. What federal marshal? You mean Coleman? He had an unfortunate accident on the road from Millbrook. Horse threw him, broke his neck. Jake's blood went cold. Eliza's hand found his arm, gripped tight. You murdered a federal marshal, Jake said. I didn't do anything. I was here in town all night. Plenty of witnesses. Morrison motioned with his gun. Now, Mrs. Thornton, bring me those papers. No? Then I'll take them from your corpse. Your choice. Jake heard horses outside. A lot of horses. Morrison heard them too, his smile faltering. Judge Morrison, a voice called from outside. This is Captain Sanders, Texas Rangers. Come out with your hands empty. Morrison's face went white as fresh cotton. You wired them. Yesterday, Eliza said. From Millbrook. Before we even left town. Morrison raised his pistol toward Eliza. Jake drew the Colt, but McAllister was already moving, grabbing for the gun. The front door exploded inward. Rangers poured in, rifles ready. Nobody move! Morrison spun toward the door, fired wild. A Ranger's rifle cracked. Morrison fell backward, a red stain spreading across his white shirt. He tried to speak, blood bubbling from his mouth. Then nothing. McAllister dropped his gun, hands high. The other men followed suit. Captain Sanders, a weathered man with sergeant stripes from the war, looked at the scene. You folks all right? Yes, sir, Jake said, holstering the Colt. Marshal Coleman sent us. Got your wire? Mrs. Thornton? Sanders looked at the portfolio in Eliza's hands. That the evidence. Everything you need, Eliza said, handing it over. Sanders flipped through the documents, whistled low. "This'll hang half the courthouse. Good work." He looked at Morrison's body. "Though seems like justice already got served." "What about Coleman?" Jake asked. "The judge said Coleman's fine. Stopped to rest his horse is all. Be here tomorrow." Sanders smiled. "Judge must have heard wrong." They took McAllister and the others away in irons. The judge's body followed in a wagon, covered with a tarp. By full sunrise, word had spread through town. People gathered in the street, whispering, staring. Reverend Garrett approached Jake and Eliza as they stood by the schoolhouse. "Heard there was some trouble." "Some," Jake agreed. "Also heard you two might be staying. Town needs a teacher." He looked at Eliza. "Position's yours if you want it. Comes with a house. Small, but sound." Eliza looked at Jake. He saw the question in her eyes. "What about the Becker place up?" she asked him. "It'll still be there. But this is here. Now. Real." Jake took her hand. "Your choice." She thought for a long moment, then shook her head. "Thank you, Reverend. But no, we've got our own place to build." They left Clearwater at noon, this time openly, with folks waving goodbye. Some even smiled. The judge's reign was over, and the town could breathe again. The Becker place stood empty, just as Jake had described. 2 rooms, sound roof, good well. Dusty and neglected, but solid, real. Jake pushed open the door. Sunlight streamed through the east windows, illuminating dust motes like tiny golden promises floating in the air. Eliza walked to the center of the main room, turned a slow circle. "It needs everything," she said. "Everything. Could take years to make it proper. Probably." She smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her, full and genuine and free. "Good. I'd hate to be bored." They spent the rest of the day cleaning, planning, dreaming out loud. By evening, they'd swept the floors, cleaned the windows, started a fire in the fireplace. Jake had shot a rabbit. Eliza had found wild onions and greens. Their first meal in their own home wasn't fancy, Papa, but it was theirs. That night, they spread their blankets in front of the fire. Eliza lay with her head on Jake's shoulders, watching the flames dance. "No regrets?" she asked. "None." "You, just one." Jake tensed. "What?" "I wish my parents could have seen this. Seen me free. Seen me happy." "They know," Jake said. "Somehow, they know." She lifted her head to look at him. "You believe that—" "I believe we earned this. Every bit of it. $7.40 bought your freedom, but we paid the rest in courage. You stood up to Morrison, Tipu, went back for those papers. That took more courage than I've got. You spent everything you had on a stranger. Best investment I ever made." She kissed him then, soft and certain. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears. But she was smiling. "What now?" she asked. "Now we build. Plant a garden. Fix the fence. Maybe get some chickens." "I meant right now." Jake pulled her close. "Right now. We're free. We're safe. We're home. Everything else can wait until tomorrow." Outside, a coyote howled, distant and wild. The wind whispered through the cottonwoods. Inside, the fire crackled, warm and bright. Eliza fell asleep against Jake's shoulder, her breathing deep and even. Jake stayed awake a while longer, watching the fire, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. $7.40. A cage in the town square. A desperate bid for freedom. Now this. A cabin that needed work. Land that needed tending. A woman who'd chosen to stay. He thought about writing to Coleman tomorrow, confirming they'd testify when needed. Thought about riding to the nearest ranch, looking for work. Thought about all the tomorrows stretching ahead. But mostly, he just held Eliza and watched the fire and felt something he hadn't felt since before the war. Peace. The fire burned low. Jake added another log, careful not to wake Eliza. Sparks rose up the chimney like tiny prayers. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, they were exactly where they belonged, free to choose, and choosing each other. 1 year later, October 1883, Jake split firewood while morning coffee boiled on the stove. The rhythm felt right. Lift, swing, crack, stacked the pieces neat against the house. Winter coming, but they were ready. Root cellar full of preserves Eliza had put up, smokehouse hanging with venison, potatoes and turnips buried in sand. Eliza came out with 2 cups, handed him one. Her belly showed round under her apron 5 months along, moving strong. The midwife said December, maybe Christmas. She surveyed their kingdom vegetable garden harvested and mulched for winter. Chicken coop with 12 good layers. The barn they'd raised with neighbor help last month. Letter came yesterday, she said. From Coleman. What's it say? But Morrison's accomplices all got prison time. McAllister got 5 years. The families are getting their land back. Every acre. She sipped her coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink. Also says there's a reward. $500 for the evidence we provided. Jake set down his axe. $500? Enough to buy the Becker place outright. No waiting 5 years to prove up. That's wonderful. We could... I already told him no. Jake studied her face. No. We don't need their money. Everything here. We built with our own hands. Earned with our own sweat. She took his hand, placed it on her belly. The baby kicked, strong and certain. This place is ours because we chose it, worked it, bled for it. Not because someone handed us a reward. They stood together watching the sun climb higher. A year ago they'd been strangers. Now they were this, whatever this was. Family, partners, home. The school board came by yesterday while you were at the Hendersons, Eliza said. What did they want? Teacher for the county school. 10 children now, more coming. They offered me the position. That's wonderful. You going to take it? Already did. Start Monday. They're setting up class in the Miller's barn until they can build a proper schoolhouse. She smiled. $8 a month, plus what the families can spare. Real money. Jake pulled her close, careful of her belly. Mrs. Thornton, the teacher, has a nice sound. Better than the woman in the cage. That was never who you were. No. But it's who I might have stayed. If not for you. The morning warmed quick. Indian summer giving them one last gift before winter. Jake went back to splitting wood while Eliza fed the chickens, gathered eggs, normal chores, the kind free people did. Around noon, riders approached. Jake's hand went to the rifle by the door. Old habits died hard. But it was the Hendersons from 2 miles north, bringing their eldest daughter. Heard Mrs. Thornton's teaching school, Henderson said. Sophie here's eager to learn her letters. Class starts Monday, Eliza told the girl, who couldn't have been more than 7. Can you bring a slate? Yes, ma'am. They stayed for coffee and cornbread. Henderson and Jake talked about wheat prices and the new railroad spur coming through. The women discussed preserving techniques and baby clothes. Normal conversation. The kind that built communities. After they left, Jake found Eliza in the garden, pulling the last of the carrots. She worked steady, competent, humming something he recognized as a hymn her brother used to sing. Happy? He asked. She straightened, hand on her back, dirt on her hands and knees. Yes. Even with all this work, even with winter coming, especially with all that. She looked around their small kingdom cabin tight against weather, barn full of hay, root cellar stocked. This is what I dreamed about in that cage. Not rescue, not revenge, just this. A normal life where I could plant things and watch them grow. That night after supper, they sat in the 2 chairs Jake had built, set on the porch to catch the evening breeze. Eliza was knitting something tiny, a cap for the baby. Jake was fixing a harness, hands working steady. Been thinking, Jake said. Dangerous habit. About names. For the baby. Eliza's hand stilled. What kind of names? Timothy if it's a boy. After your brother. Tears filled her eyes. But she smiled. He'd like that. What if it's a girl? Sarah. After my mother. Sarah Thornton. She tested the sound. Pretty name. Strong name. They sat quiet as the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. The chickens settled into their coop for the night, soft clucking and rustling. Jake. Yeah. That day in town, when you bid on me, what made you do it, really? Jake set down the harness, thought about how to answer true. You weren't broken. Bent maybe, but not broken. And I thought if she can survive that cage with her dignity intact, maybe there's hope for the rest of us. Hope for you. Hope for something better than just existing. Hope for this. He gestured at their small farm, their life together. Never imagined this exactly, but something like it, something real. Eliza reached over, took his hand. $7.40. Best money I ever spent. Got your money's worth. Got more than I ever dreamed of. Full dark now, stars coming out, bright as promises. Inside, the fire needed banking, cows needed checking, all the small chores that made up a life. But they sat a moment longer, hands linked, watching the stars appear. Tomorrow would bring its own work, always did. School to teach, wood to split, animals to tend, winter to prepare for, baby to plan for. No regrets? Eliza asked. Their old ritual. None? Jake answered, so. You yet. None. And it was true. The road here had been hard cage and flight, fear and fighting, but it had led them to this moment, this porch, this peace. We should go in, Eliza said. Getting cold. In a minute. They stayed until the moon rose, silver and serene. Then together they went inside, to the fire and the lamp and the bed they shared. To the life they'd built from $7.40 and the courage to say yes when everything sensible said no. Behind them, the empty chairs rocked gently in the night breeze. Tomorrow they'd be filled again. Tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, Lord willing, free to choose, choosing each other, choosing this, every single day. Author's note. This story was inspired by actual events from the American frontier of the 1880s, created solely for entertainment purposes. This narrative does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of imagination. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental.